Cloud, dark out. All right. Well, good evening, brothers. Thank you for joining the first of the Scottish Rite educational webinar series. This evening we will be learning something about Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Couple items of note. This is not a tiled meeting, so obviously govern yourselves as accordingly. As you heard, I started the recording. Please keep yourself on mute during the call or during the session. If you need to unmute, you can use the space bar to temporarily unmute yourself. I will be muting people if need be. If you have questions, send it through the chat session, or we will just open it up at the end for questions. And I will be sending a poll via email to all the registered attendees for them to submit back for feedback. So with that, the upcoming, we have this evening's purpose of Scottish Rite Masonry, and then we will be talking about the Scottish Rite Minneapolis Valley, and a few other topics coming up here, running through the 15th of October. The registrations are all set up and operational for those, so if you want to sign up for any of those sessions, please do. It will send you an email that you can use to be able to access the session. And without any further ado, Worship Brother Justin, I gave you permission, so you should be able to share if you have something.
Yep.
Now yours.
All right, give me 1 second here. Maybe two. Oh, geez, which one is it? This might be it. All right. This thing's right in the way. Push this button. There we go. All right. Well, welcome. I see a lot of familiar faces here, but for those who don't know me, I'm Justin Thompson. I'm a member of Arcana Lodge and a member of the Scottish Rite Committee here at the Minneapolis Valley. Okay. Jason touched on this just a little bit, but I'm going to go through and introduce what we got coming up over the series of the next 2 months, and then go into the purpose of Scottish Rite Masonry, cover a little bit about its formal definitions, and a little bit on the timeline on how we got to modern Scottish Rite Masonry, and then kind of break down the four bodies of the southern jurisdiction. And that will pretty much conclude this half-hour session. Just a quick aside about the sessions. You can see here that the topics we're covering aren't necessarily degree specific or even Scottish Rite specific, but kind of these general overarching concepts that we see in Masonry. We as a committee thought this would be a better use of our time, and frankly more interesting for us to cover and you to learn about. So we thought the way to go would be to do something that could be consumed. These presentations were built for the general public. As Jason covered, this is not a tiled meeting, so going over secrets and handshakes and all that would not be kosher, as it were. So these are the topics we've decided on. Next week, you got Charlie Beekman talking about the history of the Minneapolis Valley, followed by Tracy talking about an introduction to Hermeticism, how Hermeticism kind of pervaded through Western esotericism. That's a tough one to say, and how it's still relevant today. The following week, Gene is going to talk about the Kabbalah and how it relates to Freemasonry, followed by a man who needs little introduction, so I won't give him one. Hans, covering the sacred geometry again, and kind of how it's built into Masonry. We have a new member of our education team here, Brian Campbell, is going to be talking about the alchemical symbolism that we see in the Blue Lodge degrees. Very interesting, for those of us, myself included, who don't know a lot about alchemy. There's a lot of kind of coded symbolism that we see in the first 3 degrees of Blue Lodge, or as we call it, the Scottish Rite, symbolic Masonry. Following week, Dr. Brother Bill will be covering the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the legend of, and kind of the story of the Egyptian underworld. And then followed by Hans talking about the third eye, the pineal gland, its biology, how it works into these ancient religions and cultures. And wrapping up, last but not least, Dr. Bill is going to cover the figure of Enoch. Enoch, obviously the book of Enoch, a brief mention in the Bible, but otherwise kind of removed from that particular canon. But he appears in different forms in a lot of different religions. And we're going to talk about kind of the figure of Enoch rather than the specific history of Enoch. So with that, we will get moving. Just a quick aside, with this presentation and a lot of the other ones coming up, we're going to be talking about symbolism. And symbolism is open to everyone's interpretation. What one person gets out of a symbol might not be what another person gets. So when I go through this presentation, some of this is my interpretation. If you don't agree with it, that's okay. That's what we're supposed to be building here, is the ability to disagree without necessarily being disagreeable. So just keep that in mind as you watch these presentations over the coming couple months. And I really hope that you stick around and check them all out, because this is some great stuff. So the purpose of Scottish Rite Masonry, let's first start with the creed and the mission of Scottish Rite Masonry, as that is kind of the way it's spelled out as far as the Southern jurisdiction goes. And obviously a creed is kind of the formal summary of the guidelines of an organization in this case. So, I'm just going to read it quickly. Human progress is our cause. Liberty of thought our supreme wish. Freedom of conscience our mission, and the guarantee of equal rights to all people everywhere our ultimate goal. So that's obviously the 30,000-foot view of the purpose of Scottish Rite Masonry. And with all Masonic bodies, it's got a pretty lofty goal. But let's kind of break that down a little bit. So human progress is our cause. We want humankind to progress, hopefully for the better. Liberty of thought our supreme wish. We want all people to have the ability to kind of think for themselves, not be beholden to any sort of political party or specific paradigm or religious or etc., any sort of control over their own independent thought. And that kind of goes for the freedom of conscience as well. We want you to be guided by your own conscience, your own morals, and not to be beholden to others or to be influenced by others. And then the guarantee of equal rights to all people everywhere, our ultimate goal. Again, a very lofty goal, so that all people are afforded the same opportunity, the same ability to progress in their own way. So, that being the creed, the mission statement, and I won't get into it specifically, but the mission statement here is, sorry, I got this thing in the way here. There we go. Move it right on out of the way. All right. Our mission here in Southern jurisdiction, Scottish Rite Freemasonry, is to improve our members and enhance our communities. And we do that by teaching our members the principles of brotherly love, tolerance, charity, and truth. And those, I mean, obviously tolerance, especially nowadays, is not as prevalent as I think we all agree it should be. And by embracing the value, high moral, social, and spiritual values. So what we're talking about here is by improving our members through these principles and through these values, we are creating men who hopefully are leaders in their community, and so that they can push their community in a better direction, as well as being someone that people want to emulate, and hopefully through that, bring in more membership. You see a guy who's doing good work, you think, well, that guy's a pretty decent dude. I'm a pretty decent dude. Maybe Masonry is for me. So, it's one of the best calling cards we as Masons can have is a good Mason out in the community doing Masonry. So that's the creed and the mission of Scottish Rite Masonry. Now we're going to touch on a little bit of the timeline that got us into modern Scottish Rite Masonry. And there are several key events that kind of paved the way for what we got going on here. So coming out of the Dark Ages, we see the Renaissance, starting approximately 14th century and going through Michelangelo's life and slightly beyond. Coming out of Italy, we see the importance of knowledge. We see, for the first time, not necessarily the first time in history, but first time maybe in modern history, we see more priority towards knowledge, more acceptance, or maybe it becomes a little popular, a little more culturally acceptable. There's an interest in this knowledge, and there's a rediscovery of these classical teachings. Kabbalah is rediscovered during this time period, as well as many other classically already known things that were sort of lost or buried during the near 1,000 years of the Middle Ages after the downfall of Rome. And this is important because obviously Scottish Rite Masonry, we touch a lot on these classic teachings, and we generally promote the growth of knowledge. So the Renaissance obviously works to our favor in this case. Next we see the Protestant Reformation. Starting in 1517 with Martin Luther publishing the 95 Theses, and going into 1648 at the Peace of Westphalia, which ended the 30-year war between Protestant and Catholic factions. And the Protestant Reformation is important because it starts this separation of church and state. For a long time, the Roman Catholic Church, I'm not picking on anyone, that's just kind of how history goes. The Roman Catholic Church really controlled a lot of how the state ran. And with this Reformation, we start to see this separation of the church and the state, the government, and the religious organizations. And we also develop a direct relationship with God, or deity, or however you want to define it. Previously, you had to go through the priest, and the priest, you don't talk to God, you talk to the priest, and the priest talks to God. Well, with this Reformation, we now see the direct relationship with God being established. And this is especially important for us in Scottish Rite because there's a lot of dabbling in other religions. There's a lot of establishing the divine spark within you and understanding your relationship with God directly. And so you're able to craft some of your own spirituality now with a little bit more freedom. So that moves us into the emergence of Freemasonry, of Blue Lodge Freemasonry, when the four lodges get together and form the United Grand Lodge of England. This is obviously important for Scottish Rite Masonry because it becomes the foundation that we build on here in the, quote, higher degrees of Masonry. the principles of Masonry are established, and we are able to build off of that. So, I'm gonna move this thing out of the way again. So the French Revolution, starting in 1789 when the commoners leave the General Assembly, and going to 1799 when Napoleon sacks the French legislature and becomes the guy in charge. The political and civil liberty that is established through the French Revolution plays right into the teachings of Scottish Rite Masonry. It's, we're starting to define that these rights that are spelled out both in the American Constitution and the French, I assume it's a constitution, something like that. We're starting to establish that these rights come naturally to us as human beings from God, or however you want to define that, and that the government merely protects them, or more accurately, kind of leaves them alone, and that they are not the ones that grant it to us. And why the French Revolution is a little bit more important to us in Scottish Rite Masonry than necessarily the American Revolution, though both are important. In the American Revolution, the English king retains his power, just he no longer can use it in America. And the French Revolution is not so much. But also the degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry, despite the name, come from France. So with this revolution and the removal of the powers that be, we're given more space to kind of grow and flourish this thing we've got going. And then finally, the Industrial Age, starting mid-18th century and going to the mid-19th century, or some may argue is still going on, still spreading in certain countries where industry is catching up to the technology of some of the more developed nations. And this is important because now you're seeing, one, the technological advancement that's coming with it. This kind of doubling down on science is sort of rediscovered, but you're also seeing a little bit more downtime for the common man. And that's giving them space to work on some of these more esoteric or more kind of not unnecessary, but these ideas that we discuss in Scottish Rite Masonry that you're now allowed to work on a little bit better. So those are the events that kind of paved the way for the development of modern Scottish Rite Masonry. And now we will talk just a little bit about the history, the timeline of Scottish Rite Masonry. So throughout the 18th century, you see many of the symbolic lodges, the blue lodges, are expanding on the initial 3 degrees, and they're coming up with additional rites, additional higher degrees, again, of Masonry. We're all on the level here, so higher degrees is a bit of a misnomer, but it is what it is. One such rite that you're seeing is the Order of the Royal Secret, formed in France, invented by brother Stephen Morin, a 25-degree rite system, obviously established around 1763. And he's given charter by the Grand Lodge of France to kind of spread this Masonry throughout the world. And through his deputies in North America, he's able to spread to Jamaica, Scottish Rite, well, not Scottish Rite, I'm sorry. The Order of the Royal Secret spreads to Jamaica, to New Orleans, to New York, and down the eastern U.S. seaboard. Then the big event happens. May 31st, 1801, at the Shepherd's Tavern in Charleston, South Carolina, the 11 gentlemen of Charleston established the Mother Supreme Council, officially beginning the start of modern Scottish Rite Masonry, Southern jurisdiction, of course. At which point, well, not exactly then, approximately 1855, Brother Albert Mackey, who is the secretary of the council at the time, forms a committee with Albert Pike and a few other gentlemen to modernize the degrees of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. And he comes out with his first draft about then, but it's quite a number of years later and post-American Civil War before Albert Pike is able to finalize these degrees. So Albert Pike, and no good discussion of history of Scottish Rite history would be complete without a little Albert Pike. I chose the kind of the younger looking picture. We've all seen old Albert Pike with the white hair and the 3 tons of bling on, but I thought this was a little more down to earth. So anyways, Pike viewed Scottish Rite Masonry as a good way to kind of pervade these teachings, these moral and ethical teachings through rituals. Obviously, we know them as the 29 degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry, 29 additional degrees. He used these rituals to incorporate ancient wisdom from philosophies from old religions. He starts synthesizing different ancient religions and kind of starts picking and choosing and coming up with these, what he thinks, I assume, are the best philosophies for the betterment of man. He also writes Morals and Dogma, you know, that big tome all us Scottish Rite guys got to carry around, lugging every Thursday, breaking our backs. These are the companion lectures for the rituals. So the idea being you receive the degree, you read the lecture, and that helps, you know, synergize this this lesson that he's trying to teach, or multiple lessons, as it were. And when he's finally complete with the revision of the degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry, he has it structured in 4 bodies that we're going to talk about in just a little bit here. So that takes us to the name, the moniker that we've kind of affectionately given Scottish Rite Masonry as the University of Freemasonry. And this is kind of a mix of different religions, history, philosophy, and different practices. So you see many religions covered in the degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry. The Abrahamic religions, you know, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Babism, Baha'i, Druze, as well as Buddhism, ancient Egyptian, Gnosticism, Hinduism, Sufism, Zoroastrianism, and on and on. You know, the list of religions that are covered in the Scottish Rite degrees are quite numerous. So I don't know if anyone here is not a Scottish Rite member, but if they're not, you know, if you're expecting more of the Old Testament, don't worry, you'll get it. But you can also dabble in a lot of other philosophies. So we then kind of start touching on historical events as well. The antediluvian, the pre-flood history of the world. Obviously, biblical history is covered quite a bit in the Scottish Rite degrees, as well as the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, the Crusades, you know, kind of all that castles and swords, knights in shining armor jazz that we all enjoy so much. And then we get to the practices. Here we're seeing alchemy, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, numerology, Pythagoreanism, sacred geometry. A few of these topics my cohorts are going to cover in the coming weeks. And I think those will be pretty excellent as well. So then we get to the 4 progressive levels of Scottish Rite Masonry. So as I said, he broke down, Albert Pike broke down the 29 degrees into 4 bodies, each part of containing certain degrees, part of the Scottish Rite here. The first of these being the Lodge of Perfection, covers degrees 4 through 14. And the overarching point of the Lodge of Perfection here is this idea of self-discovery, awakening the moral and spiritual nature, finding your divine spark, as the name may suggest, and perfecting yourself, making you a better man, getting you more in touch with your purpose, as it were. So then we move on to the chapter Rose Croix. We'll cover the degrees 15 through 18. And, the overarching point of the chapter Rose Croix is the value of liberty. And that isn't just necessarily, governmental liberty, a liberty of action, but also liberty of thought, liberty of conscience, liberty of kind of not being beholden to anyone while still valuing others. And that gets to having love being the guiding force of your life, which is really kind of touched on the 18th degree. This is kind of the idea of doing things for selfless reasons instead of selfish reasons. So then we move on to the largest body of the Scottish Rite, the Council of Kadosh, where they really talk about strengthening Masonry in the world. So as we worked on ourselves in the Lodge of Perfection and kind of given ourselves a better purpose in the chapter Rose Croix, here we're kind of empowered to get out there and do it. Masonry, it's all great if we're sitting in our lodges thinking good things and talking great about different morals and virtues and stuff. But the real point of Masonry is to do it. It's work. It's a practice. And the Council of Kadosh really kind of hammers on that, on getting out there and doing it. One of my favorite degrees, for those of you who have seen it, or hopefully it's maybe it'll entice some of you who haven't seen it in a while to come back, is the 20th degree. I think that's just about spot on as far as degrees go. It tells you exactly what we should be doing and kind of how we should be doing it. So I think that's pretty awesome. And then last but certainly not least, the consistory covers the last two degrees, 31 and 32. Obviously, the most unforgettable degrees, but I might just be biased as a member of the Minneapolis Consistory. And here we go back to this idea of self-examination, kind of understanding your motives better. And then once you've gone through that and realized that you're using Masonry for its intended purpose, the 32nd degree really kind of gets on the idea of empowering you to get out there and do it. And you've come to the right conclusion, and we want you to get out there and be confident in using Masonry for the betterment of mankind. So that pretty much covers what I've got here for the purpose of Scottish Rite Masonry. It's an amalgamation, a mix of historical, philosophical, and religious teachings, and for the purpose of awakening your spiritual self and a better understanding of yourself, as well as a hunger for knowledge, for education. Obviously, the education guy is going to come here and tell you the purpose of what we do is education, because I wouldn't be doing my job if I told you anything else. And the idea with this self-improvement and this progress is that, taken to the nth degree, these rituals and these teachings, if everyone were to live them, could bring about a new age of enlightenment, perhaps a utopia here on earth, the idea of the New Jerusalem, the heaven on earth kind of thing. But that's obviously taken many years and many steps forward from where we are right now. So I guess with that, I don't know if anyone have any questions, or is there anything else to touch on?
Justin, did you say that this might be shareable? Or maybe it's a better question to ask for somebody else, but is this going to be shareable where we be able to access this later if I wanted to show a couple of people this?
You know, I'm not sure. Jason, you got a better answer?
Yes, it will be as soon as I kind of figure out all the plumbing pieces behind the scenes, but yes, that is the intent.
Awesome.
Oh, Justin,
Yes, sir.
Don Saverson here.
I'm aware, sir. Yes.
I have a bit of a comment regarding the separation of church and state that was touched upon in your presentation. And the separation of church and state has great staying power. And I've recently been involved in reading a book regarding religion in the early colonies, American colonies. And most of those colonies had a state-sponsored religion. There was the Anglican Church, Church of England, there were the Baptists, there was Jewish colonies, there were almost any denomination you would think of. All the religion adopted by any individual state was the only religion allowed. You were not welcome, and as a matter of fact, you could be put in jail for practicing other than the state-sponsored religion. The notable exceptions to those colonies was Rhode Island, where they had a great polyglot explosion of various religions, and Pennsylvania. But the rest of them, they were pretty exclusive. So state-sponsored religion is still with, well, in the Middle East, of course, it's Islam, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, Don, this is Mark Pruitt. I was just reading a book about that similarly not too long ago. One of the parts of the timeline that I would have probably added was the Scottish Enlightenment, especially piggybacking off of what you're talking about, the original colonies and their requirement of a state-sponsored church. Virginia, for example, was sponsoring the Anglican Church, and the Virginia government was actually taxing the citizens of Virginia to pay for the priests of the Anglican Church.
Yes.
And a lot of our founding fathers who attended Princeton were severely, not severely, but incredibly influenced by the Scottish Enlightenment and the ideas behind that. And one in particular was James Madison. And he was a very strong proponent of the separation of church and state to the point where it eventually ended up in our United States Constitution.
Yes. I would recommend the book, Religion, The History of Religion in America. It's a long, dry, dusty read, but it's worthwhile.
Do you know who the author is?
I can get it. Yes, I have. I get the publisher and I get the author for you. So excuse me for a moment.
Don, you can just give me a call or email me if you don't need to get it right now.
Too slow. Oh.
So this is Billy Richards. I maybe had something to add to that conversation. He was saying church and state predominantly in the Middle East. I'd maybe argue that totalitarian countries that ban religion is maybe a similar thing.
I would agree with you, yes.
Certainly. The point of the separating church and state is the free expression thereof. And it's kind of the same thing when the state is telling you where you can't practice any religion or only one religion. Oh, there it is. Don, what's the author?
Edwin Gaustad, that's Gaustad, and
Excellent.
Lee Schmidt, Leigh for Lee, Schmidt with a D.
Excellent. I'll give that a read. Thanks, Don.
So I had a question. You mentioned that there's 4 bodies of the Scottish Rite. Now, I'm mostly familiar with Blue Lodge. I've been to one Royal Arch meeting before COVID hit, so everything shut down. How are the meetings structured? Does it meet just like a normal lodge body would meet? What do meetings for these various bodies look like?
Justin, you want to take that, or do you mind if someone else fields it?
Oh, Terrence, I would love if you would field it.
Fabulous.
We have someone
So-
else though.
Yeah. Can we? Anyone but Terrence. We do have the 4 bodies, officer bodies at the Scottish Rite. The way they function, at least here, I can't tell you 100% everywhere in the southern jurisdiction, but here in Minnesota, the 4 separate bodies are responsible for putting on the overall degrees that are in their section. So as he said, when you have the Lodge of Perfection as the 1st through the 14th, or 1st through the 13th, or 14th, excuse me, they are responsible for those degrees. They don't necessarily have to, field them all or learn them all or perform them all, but they fall under their jurisdiction. We meet. We don't have meetings in the sense like a Blue Lodge meeting, but we do meet once a month, first Tuesday of every month. We have what's called the Heads of the Bodies meeting, and then the Lodge of Perfection meets right after us, because they are of the 4 bodies that are in existence, they are the sort of the governing lodge. They're the top guys. They sign the checks. They pay the bills of the 4 bodies.
To take
We
care
all
of the
have
business.
Yeah, they do the business of the valley. We all have a say in it, as each head of body and has a say in what goes on, but they have the kind of overall ability to do things. But each body, we have the heads of the body meeting that anyone can attend. Mostly the committee guys attend, but any Scottish Rite member is welcome to attend the heads of body meeting. Now, right now, we've been doing them on Zoom, obviously, like anybody else, but most people don't. If they attend a few, they find out very quickly, this is business. That's all it is. And so the meat and potatoes of the valley is coming and seeing the degrees, learning the lessons that we teach, coming and seeing the education, learning the lessons there. But we do have the monthly meeting, and that's about it. Like I said, we're responsible for these degrees. There's the terminal degrees. There are the 5 terminal degrees, 4 of which are put on by each individual body, the 14th, 18th, 30th, and 32nd, that are very much an integral part of the officers in each line. Some of those degrees have other people in them, but some of them, like the 18th degree, it's strictly the 18th degree officers that participate in that degree. The 4th degree is a combination of different guys. Say what?
I was just going to say, I think, brother, your question was how do they differ maybe from York, right?
No, he was talking about Blue Lodge, I think, in general. I think it's just in general, Colin, right?
Well,
Yeah, I'm just curious what a meeting looks like. Do the bodies meet simply to confer the degrees, or is there a normal business meeting that goes on like they do in a Blue Lodge? Or I'm just curious about what if and when I join, what am I getting into as far as meeting requirements and all that?
Terrence is talking about the business, the 4 bodies of Scottish Rite. The degrees, you said you went through one in York, right? You probably went through the Mark Master.
No, he went through all the degrees, but we only had one meeting before the COVID kind of hit. So he hasn't had an experience of attending a lot of regular meetings at Royal Arch.
All right, yeah. Okay, our degrees are given about in a similar fashion to the Blue Lodge and York Rite degrees. but they are presented more like the Middle Ages presented morality plays. And in the Scottish Rite degrees, they're very much like those Middle Age morality plays. In many of the plays, the candidates take part in the play. In other degrees, the candidates watch and observe the play. And then in the Minneapolis Valley, which I happen to be a member of and I'm very proud of, there's an education committee that then does breakout sessions to discuss the meanings of those morality plays. That's the heart and soul of Scottish Rite Masonry. What Terrence is talking about is the business meetings are, yeah, they're very much like a Blue Lodge business meeting. They're very much meat and potatoes business meetings. And anyone, once they've had the 14th degree, is entitled to attend meetings and has a vote.
And there and again, that's, I think originally that was Colin's question, was about, it was the stated meetings, that sort of thing. Yeah, the degrees are the primary thing of Scottish Rite Masonry. And like I said, the lessons and everything are what we're there for. The education is what we're there for on a regular basis. The rest is business like anything else. But we do have those meetings. But the rest of it is once you go through your degrees, and you only have to go to the 5 terminal degrees, but you should avail yourself of all 24 degrees, all 29 degrees over and over and over. But it's at your will and pleasure. If you take all 29 degrees and the next cycle of degrees, you can only make it down for 5 degrees, great, come down for those 5 degrees. But there's no, your involvement is strictly what you want it to be. Unlike York Rite, where you have 3 more meetings a month if you join all 3 bodies, you don't have that with Scottish Rite. You have the option of coming down when you want to come down, participate how you want to participate, but there's no strict regime unless you become an officer or such not. There's no strict regime as to you have to be here every Thursday night.
Maybe Terrence, to expand a little bit on what you just said is, and Colin to articulate a point that Justin kind of cruised over quickly. All the Scottish degree, all the degrees, including the 4 bodies, are basically expansions on the Blue Lodge, right? So really at the core of the Scottish Rite teaching is the Blue Lodge, the 3 degrees that you as a Master Mason mastered, right? And each of these bodies expands on the teachings of the Blue Lodge, and that's done in the form of rituals, right? That you would attend, you would watch them, you would subsequently discuss them, you would reflect on them, and then basically go home. Or the next degree cycle, you basically feel you've mastered a certain aspect of it, or you come back and participate. Either participate as an actor, participate as an educator, or participate as just somebody sitting in the audience sharing their impressions. If there are degrees where you says, I really haven't figured it out yet, or you come back, you sit in, like Terrence said, you watch them again, you go again through the educational thing, and it's a lot. And many of the guys that are hanging around the Zoom thing would attest to the fact that it's a lifelong learning, because the content within the Scottish Rite is so profound and so deep that you really have to go multiple times through these cycles to just catch the bare essence of what it can give to you. So
It's like the Blue Lodge.
unlike the Blue Lodge, there's nothing like a formal meeting where, you know, brothers exchange or kind of a certain ritualistic protocol things. You are really starting a journey to improve yourself, and through that, society, as Justin kind of articulated in the mission and the creed.
Okay, so yeah, I guess to more succinctly put my question, it would be more like what would my active participation in Scottish Rite Masonry look like? And what I'm taking from this is it's more observing the degrees and then continuing to do so and attending education sessions afterwards to discuss it. It's not like going to a Blue Lodge meeting where you deal with the ritualistic opening and closing, handling business, but
Right.
it's strictly, you know, education and discussion.
Unless you want to be. If you want to participate, if you want to be an actor, if you want to help with lighting, if you want to help with the, you know, education, these are all up to you how much you want to participate. It's very interactive, or it can be just observation. And like we said, like in Blue Lodge, you could see a degree 100 times. And I swear I've seen quite a few degrees in my short period of being a Mason. And I still catch things every time I see a degree. I go, oh, I didn't get that the first 100 times I saw it. And it's even more so with the Scottish Rite, because you talk about mind-blowing stuff. You could watch these degrees 100 times and still catch only, a small part of it. And that's what the education committee is there for, to try and help you. Maybe you see the degree and then you talk about it in the education. And then maybe that next time you see the degree, you go, okay, that's what they were talking about. Okay, I get it now.
It's also
Yeah.
part of what you bring into it with yourself, right? So there's been many a times that I've had a topic on my mind or something I was been thinking about during the day. I go to one of the degrees and suddenly I hear something or I see something as part of that degree that makes me look at that problem differently, because I brought something else that was on my mind into that degree with a different frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens to me on a regular basis at these degrees. That's why I keep going and seeing the degrees for the last, well, I think it's been 8 years or so now. So.
Maybe a good characterization is that you really start exposing yourself to yourself through the medium of the Scottish Rite.
Yes. Yes, you do. I've been a Scottish Rite Mason for over 50 years, and the degrees never get old.
You're only 55. How could you be the 50-year member?
I lied my age.
Yeah, I think Hans just hit it on the head. Scottish Rite is it's very much about looking inward and growing as a person. I really recommend long form, go through all the degrees. And then when you're done, you help out with the degrees and keep reflecting, because growth is a lifelong thing.
Don't take the short course. Don't take the short way. Don't take the easy way.
Colin,
the
once
long
we start
form.
doing the long form again, one of the things that helped me is that we had a bring a brother to the Rite night that we usually do on the 27th degree, where you can get a little taste of what the Scottish Rite degrees are. And Reed Bornhold is on the call, brought me, when I had first moved to Minnesota, to one of these degrees. And it really sold me on the whole experience. If we're doing spring class, I know we're not doing fall, keep an eye out. Your double eagle in your lodge will probably let you know about bring a brother to the Rite night, and we'd love to see you there.
Oh yeah, it's been a foregone conclusion that I will be joining Scottish Rite. I've made a pact with a brother from my lodge that we would do it together, and I was master, then he was master, now I'm master again. So just working on the time to do it. And yeah, long form is the way I definitely plan on doing it. I got roped into the one day to York Rite by a certain somebody here. But yeah, I definitely intend on making the most of it.
Great. Well, we'd love to see you.
If you have to do, there it again, we try not to, we're not shaming anyone who takes the short form, but if you do take the short form, that's great. Come back. That's the beauty of the Minneapolis Valley, is normally, COVID notwithstanding, we put on all 29 degrees. And so you have that opportunity over and over to keep coming back.
Twice a year.
Currently still twice a year. So you can come back and catch up on those degrees that you missed. Or even if you're doing the long form, if you got to miss a night, you can miss a night as long as it's not a terminal degree, and come back and catch it the next cycle. Because you're going to want to do that anyway. Like we said, you're going to want to see these over and over and over again, because the lessons and the things you're going to catch are worth seeing them each and every time.
That's very true. We're one of a very few amount of valleys in the United States that do all 29 degrees. Even then, we don't do it in a weekend like some of the other ones who do all 29. We do them over a course of a period of time, so you can really take your time and experience the degrees. It's a treasure to take advantage of, but when you can.
So I received a question about how Minneapolis Valley could be in the southern jurisdiction. I'll be honest, I don't necessarily know the history of the split.
It's the 13 states, the original northern states. They didn't realize When they said, when they originally established the United States, they were like, well, this is the northern jurisdiction. Little did they know that this whole other landmass was going to become America. And they said, well, from here down, you guys can have. And all of a sudden, oh, wow, America's huge.
Yeah.
So everything south of that river structure in Wisconsin and, was it the Ohio and Mississippi? Is that right?
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Everything north of that, they said, well, we'll just keep that. You can have everything else, not knowing that that would be a lot of area. And thus the southern jurisdiction is huge.
And Wisconsin is actually northern jurisdiction, so
That's what I said.
cutoff
Yeah, split.
is just right next door to us here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they call us the not real Scottish Rite. When I talked to my uncle when he was alive, he was northern jurisdiction. Well, that's not the real Scottish Rite you guys are doing.
Wow.
I have a follow-up
Wow.
question to that. Is Alaska a southern jurisdiction?
Ooh.
I believe
Yes.
it is because it came in later, but I don't quote me, but I believe it is.
Bonnie just said yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I would assume Hawaii
It
and,
is.
and Alaska would be.
I know Hawaii is for a fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just about I think nearly every Scottish Rite Valley or Orient around the world is chartered through southern jurisdiction. So you
Yeah.
start going to Philippines, Japan,
The Mother Council of the world.
Mother
That's right.
Council of the world.
All right. Well, thank you, brothers, for attending.
Thank you,
Any other
Justin.
questions that you would want to do? Yes. Clap for
Thank you,
Justin.
Justin.
Yay,
Good work, Justin.
Well done. Well done there.
Thank you,
Working,
gentlemen.
brother. Again, let's, I can do a quick screen share because I have this up again. So we have, we're going to go back. I missed it. Again, schedule coming up. Please go out to the Scottish Rite website and sign up for that session. You will be getting an email from me here sometime this week with a link for the survey. Please submit that when you get a chance. It would be great to see any feedback and stuff like that. So other than that, that's all we got. I'm going to stop the
Are
recording.
you going to do a poll here still?
No, I was just going to do